right, so welcome back to Comic Drops, the channel where we take an intellectual approach to comics. If you've been following this channel, you know that Beneath the Trees has been the backbone of our community and we built our channel around it. We've dissected every story, analyzed every character, and speculated wildly about what's in store for the future. So today I couldn't be more excited to sit down with Patrick Horvath, creator, writer, and artist on Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees. And of course, handling Rite of Spring, which is coming out July 9th. So thanks for being with us today. We really appreciate your time, and I'm sure my community also appreciates your time as well.
Oh, well, thank you so much for all of the support and attention you've been giving the book. But also it's an honor to be on here. So thank you. I really appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. So I'd like to start out with like the tone and aesthetics of Beneath the Trees.
Sure.
It's something that a lot of fans and community talk about quite frequently. And in the Hollywood Reporter preview article, it said it's going to be scarier, gorier, and also cuter. It's an interesting combination there. Um, so that's like an evolution of the original formula, I would say. So what do you think is most challenging about balancing those three things with Beneath the Trees and then maybe also with Rite of Spring as well? Is
Sure.
there a certain balance that you try to strike?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly when I set out to do the first book, I basically had like four main things I wanted to aim for. I wanted to make it cute and fun. And I also wanted to make it like really dark and upsetting. And that was all of those were the four main ingredients that I was aiming for. And I I was afraid that I think my main concern when you deal with any sort of horror or, even not even horror, but just like violence in general, is for the violence to be sort of flippant or dashed off or sort of done, I don't know, in a disingenuous way, I guess is the best way to put it. And I
Mhm.
wanted to make sure that all of it was that there were ramifications to it. You know what I mean? Like there was an impact that it would have, and consequences in the community and with the way it would play out. So um that was kind of, to me, you know, that was the main concern. I found when I got into it that the balance kind of came pretty intuitively. I didn't
Okay.
struggle with it. I just basically, like, I did what felt right. And then I relied on my editors, to Maggie Howell was my main editor, and Jake Williams was also assistant on the first run. And I wanted to make sure that I was kind of giving it my all. So I went all in and was relying on them to, bounce back anything that wasn't working or whatever.
Okay.
And instead they were like, "Yep, that's great. And here's a couple notes to make it better." And that
Okay.
was
Cool.
that was it. Like, it was, we were totally synced up from the very beginning, like from the pitch, we were synced up. And so it was just like, yeah, we just kind of hit a really good stride with all that stuff. And then I just kept it going. And it's kind of continued on. The Getting into Rite of Spring, it's a different tone. It's a different book. Um, and as you've seen the first issue, it definitely there's a meaner quality to it, I think, by virtue of our new character that we have, Monica Brewer, who's the sister of the
Mhm.
duck whose unfortunate end we saw in issue one of the very first book. And now we're like 8 years on. So she's had like 8 years of just being gnarled and warped by this,
Mhm.
obsession of trying to find out what happened to her brother, who, for as far as she know, just disappeared off the face of the earth. And so the meanness, I think, felt necessary. But it's but and the Woodbrook that we will come back to is going to be the Woodbrook that went through everything that happened in the first book. And so that's gonna be there. That is still the Woodbrook that was like cute and innocent to a certain degree, but they've obviously lost a lot of that innocence after.
Okay.
But it's still very quaint. It's still Woodbrook. Um,
Mhm.
I still feel horrible about everything I do to these poor animal people. but But yeah, I think in a nutshell, that's kind of like that's my approach to the tone.
Okay, well, that's sounds great. And I will say that it was refreshing to read the first issue, just in the way it was refreshing to read the first issue of the original series as
Oh, right
well,
on. Cool.
from a
I'm glad to
tonal
hear that.
perspective. Um, just to let you know, I kind of stumbled upon Beneath the Trees. I'm an avid comic reader,
Sure.
and I kind of stumbled upon it. Everybody was talking about it, and I was just kind of blown away. It was very refreshing to read a comic book that took a different approach to things and presented a unique narrative and tried to do
Oh, I
something.
appreciate that.
Yeah, and kind of try to do something unique for a change.
Sure. Well, I mean, it was just a very fun idea that I had had. And when IDW was like, yeah, we're all in on this. This sounds perfect. And they were on board with how dark I wanted it to be.
Mhm.
We went into production on it. And then at that point, like I threw in a bunch of stuff that I personally would want to see in a book
Mhm.
that I was reading, but also just weird stuff that would, I was sort of turning over in my head that I was just like, I don't know if I'll ever get a chance with a publisher to do another book. So let me make sure I get this in there.
Mhm.
And it turns out that a lot of the stranger stuff that I put in was like a lot of the stuff that people really resonated with. And so I'm like, okay, well, that's cool. Like,
Sure.
it's just very encouraging, especially because like I did not think that people would be into half of that stuff. Um, but I mean, I guess it's a good lesson that maybe the stranger you get, the more universal the appeal becomes.
Sure. I guess. Yeah. And I always think back to that first issue when Sam first went to the city in the
Mhm.
original series and abducted Daniel. I wasn't expecting that. And then
Sure.
turning
Yeah.
the page and seeing that she had dismembered his body,
Right. Yeah.
I was like completely flabbergasted by that. But that made me want to read more. I mean, that just
Sure.
it hooked me right there. So,
And it's funny because like a lot of my art um and just daily drawings and stuff like that has like a mild obsession with um like taking bodies apart or like looking at bodies and like sort of sectioned off in weird ways like that.
okay.
A lot of it had to do with the Tom Petty video for Don't Come Around Here No More, which is a
Hmm.
Alice in Wonderland themed video. And there's this
Sure. Yeah.
section, so the section where she's like the sheet cake and they're like
Sure. Yeah.
serving,
Yeah.
dude, that I saw that way too young. Like I saw that when I was like 5 or something. And like it was too much. And it's not graphic, it's literally just cake. But like
Hmm.
it looks like it's part of her body.
Sure.
And the head part's alive. And you're like, this is so messed. It really like made me nauseous, but like obviously it was like too spicy for me, right? For my 5-year-old brain. But like
Sure.
but it stuck with me, obviously. So like I
Hmm.
so that was it. That's it. That's like honestly the genesis of like how I came to get to how I had Samantha deal with her, like her method.
Wow.
Um,
So we can thank Tom Petty for that.
yes, or whoever the director was for that video had the crazy idea. Um,
Sure.
uh, but um, but yeah, and the thing that's wild is like I'm taking it to like a much gnarlier conclusion of having like an anatomically correct segmenting of like a body. And it's
Mhm.
pretty much like a human anatomy on the inside. But it was it yeah, if for some reason like it just felt like it had to be that. And so then yeah, and it caught a lot of people off guard because of how so a lot of the violence in the book is sort of like tableau. Like it's sort of the scene that you come upon. Like you don't,
Mhm.
and obviously you see her like slitting a throat or like you see like a buzzing saw or something, but you don't really see her like going, like you just see the result, you know?
Sure. Sure.
And so a lot of the violence is sort of like that, um, which might help it be, I don't know. There's something about it that's like, it feels like on one hand it's a little more palatable and then just for maybe sensitive audiences, but then on the other hand some people really don't like it, which I appreciate. I could appreciate that. And then other people are like, I hate horror but I like this.
Okay. Sure.
And so that's been a really interesting result as well that I hadn't anticipated. um but yeah, that jarring quality, like when I came up with the idea in my head, it was very much like it has to be, it would be this cute, like Richard Scarry was honestly the thing I was thinking of, who had done
Hmm.
a bunch of children's books and had these anthropomorphic animals in this cute little town called Busy Town.
Hmm.
And it was like, yeah, what if we had like a serial killer in Busy Town, basically? And then it turned into like, what if you had like two and it took a killer to catch a killer, and it was gnarly, like it was dark. And I was like, and it had, a lot of upsetting stuff in this cute town. I was like, that would be horrible. Like I would feel horrible doing that. But at the same time, like it was such a thought that I was like, I have to do that at some point. Like
Sure.
this sounds like too good to pass up. And then yeah, and I gave them three other pitches when I did it, and that was the one they zeroed in on. I think
Okay.
because of that sort of compelling, nature of the sort of juxtaposition. So it's yeah, there's something about it that I think a lot of us sort of are like, I need to, seems very wrong, but I need to see more.
Sure. Yeah. That's what got me right there as well. Just that experience, that experience you created in the first issue, where it immediately made me think of the Berenstain Bears,
Oh,
because
right
that's
on.
kind of what I
Yeah.
grew up with,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, of course.
And then I turn the page and I see that, and then by the end of the comic, now we have two killers kind of
Right.
rivaling one another. Like I was like, this is the greatest thing I've read all year. I mean, this is great. I have to read the rest of this. And that catharsis of going through that in the first issue, just great
Oh, thanks.
to completely hook me. Yeah. So, um, so with the creative process, now that we're talking about creative process and
Sure.
storytelling and all that, um, you had mentioned that you hadn't originally planned for there to be a sequel to this in the Hollywood Reporter article.
Right.
Um, but there was a letter in the back of Preludium
Hmm.
where you're talking about that creative process, that you did leave the door open
Oh, yeah. Yes, yes, yes.
for future series and things
Highly
like that.
recommend
So,
that for anybody doing a book anytime. Like it's, unless you have like such a final thing that you had, there's just no way, you don't ever want to mess around with it anymore, whatever. You just want to totally put a nail in it.
mhm.
That's great. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you do have the hopes for that it could continue, like give it an ending, but like don't make it so that you can't do something else with it. You know what I mean? Like
Sure,
it's just like, why not? Why not? Just in case.
safeguards in place.
Yeah, for sure.
So, where in that did it finally click with you that, hey, there's going to be more story to tell here?
Oh,
I'm definitely going to be
pretty
moving
early
forward
on.
with a future series. Where did that click for the first time?
It was like, let's see. I think I was working on issue 4 by the time issue 1 came out. And it was basically like at the end of issue 1, as I was doing it, I was like, "Ah, there's a lot more you could do with it." Like you start killing these characters, and especially with Cherry, and you're like, "Ah, there's like so much more you could have done with this." But like you have like 6 issues, and that all this stuff is sort of preordained based on their model for the budget and what
Mhm.
what's normal, and then a lot of this is going to be collected as a trade, right? That's sort of the standard, way you go about doing it. And so you have like a limited page count, and you got a limited issue count, and you have to tell this story. It has to have beginning, middle, and end, right? All these things, right? And so you're kind of going through it and trying to pace it out as best you can, but then you're like, yeah, these characters die, and you're like, oh man, there's so much more I could have done with this. Um, and then in issue 3, we have a funeral, and multiple characters dealing with grief. And so then I was like, oh, it'd be really, and plus there was this line, I think specifically from Samantha, acknowledging that she's like, I don't even see the impact that my murders are having on the people, just because they don't even get closure. And I
Mhm.
think it was in that moment that I was like, if I get to do more, like I would do like the follow up of some family member of the doc and them trying to find out what happened, like, and the impossible task of like trying to find this missing body. And so
Mhm. Mhm.
so that was set in place like probably around then. So before issue 1 even came out, had my idea. And like basically like a week or 2 into issue 1 coming out, it was obvious that this thing had legs. So then IDW was pretty quick about being like, "Do you want to do more?" And I was like, "Yes, like I definitely want
Sure.
to do more." So it was pretty. So like October 2023, like we were like, "Let's do more."
Okay. Yeah.
And then it's just been, finishing it up in 2024, and then doing the ash can, and that brought me to like June, and then I kind of needed a break. And then I also ended up doing a ton of cons, a ton for me, because I basically went from zero to doing them for the first
Okay.
time.
Yeah.
And I was trying to make up for lost time because I never had a book really. So, and I'm like in my mid 40s and I'm kind of making a major career shift here. So I'm trying to like get
Understand.
get myself out there. um, but anyway, yeah. And then I started putting together what the storyline would be for this next one.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. And speaking of going to cons and Preludium and all that, was that always intended to be just kind of that one off? I know it's not in the collected volumes or anything.
It's
Was that
definitely going to
just
show up. It's going to show up in collected stuff.
okay?
Um,
That's one of the
I
things that
know
my
for a fact
community
it's.
is.
I know, man. That was hard because it only showed up in those con printings, and then it wasn't gonna be feasible for them to do single prints on it again for retailers, and then I mean the thing is like it would be like it's gonna show up, it will show up at some point.
Okay.
Like I know for a fact it's in the super duper book. Like if you've seen the storybook variant, like it's in that.
Mhm.
And I'd be surprised if it didn't show up in like something else later too. That was like not super prestigious, but like with just another book. So it's gonna be around at some point. And it also is like I don't know if you've read Preludium, but it's definitely
Yes.
a yeah. So it's like it will, without spoiling anything, it definitely will tie in a way to this second arc, but it's also not like you never knew it. It's not you're not going to miss out. You know what I mean? I very
Okay.
much
Sure.
wanted to thread the needle of making it like very fun and would sort of enrich the story a little more, but like also would make it so that you could, if you didn't get your hands on it, that's not a big deal. Um,
Sure.
but yeah, but it was very fun to do, and it was also just like a very like, I mean, I think somebody was like, "Oh, are you going to do an ash can for, or you should think about doing an ash can for San Diego?" And I was like, "Oh, can we do? I don't know what I'm doing, so I don't know. What would that be like? What would our timeline be? Because it would have to be pretty fast." And that's exactly what happened. Like it was like, oh, okay, yeah, we can do it. Like we got to write it and draw it like right now, though. And I was like,
Oh,
oh,
okay.
okay.
Yeah.
And so then I just like cranked it out, and I think I turned it in like right before, like probably at the beginning of June.
Oh,
Um,
wow. Okay. Yeah.
and then I had to get printed up really quick because San Diego's in July, so I had to get
Hmm.
printed
Hmm.
and ready to rock pretty quick.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, so it will be around though. And apologies for, I know it's been like such a struggle trying to get hands on that thing for like under $20. Um, but it'll be around.
Okay. Awesome. That's good to hear. That's good to hear. Um, so kind of moving on to the time jump to the 90s. I mean, that's I was born in 86, so
Oh
90s,
yeah,
that's
perfect.
that's my period right there.
Yeah.
And I can go ahead and say without revealing anything that you captured that very nicely. It was kind of
Oh, I
nostalgic
appreciate
in a
hearing
lot of
that.
ways. So seeing all the detail you put in that. But so you jump forward 8 years.
Yeah.
So the original series took place in 86. That's when I was born. So kind of interesting there. Um, and so what drew you specifically to the 90s? And how does that kind of reflect or maybe amplify some of the things that Sam's had to deal with in the original series? How does that change up things for her?
Well, I wanted to do a big time jump because I find those really fascinating in ongoing storytelling. And so, like the big one to me that I think of in modern times was the Battlestar Galactica time jump, which I thought was
Mhm.
so fun because there's so much. It's so rich in terms of what you can have happen in between, and
Okay.
like and it could be so much stuff, and then you could find out that, it's just like, oh, there's just like that weird blank spot in between. There's so much that could happen. And also there is, I wanted to see how the trauma had changed like the lives of those that had survived the first book, and what that was like and what it meant, and to just have that distance. It felt like there's really an interesting way for them to see that impact on them and how they've evolved with that trauma. Felt really interesting. In terms of Samantha, I wanted it to be the 90s because in a sense, I wanted the world to feel like it was getting smaller. And so we have the internet now, and there's like corporate land development with like, suburbs. You have big box stores showing up all over the place now, and they're sort of taking over a lot of the commerce. They're taking a lot of the commerce away from like Main Street, basically. um, Main Street in the generic sense, but also literally the Main Street of Woodbrook. um,
Hmm.
it's uh, it's a little bit of, like, there's globalization, and so, and which I mean, like, factories are disappearing domestically, and a lot of that manufacturing is going overseas, and so like it just kind of felt like, and this is all stuff that I'm like, I feel like where we're at right now in the world there's a direct line to all that. And even earlier, like in the 80s, which is part of the
Hmm.
reason why I liked having it in the 80s anyway. But I'm also like, I was born in 1980, so it's like, I'm like, it's obviously very much like just my world that I know, you know what I mean?
Sure.
um but it felt like an interesting way to chew on those elements for me creatively, to have that as the backdrop, to have like a world that's obviously like one step off from our world,
Hmm.
and to then navigate that stuff, because it I don't know, there's something about it that's like, and it's just probably, I mean, I guess that's just art in general, right? Is that you're like working through stuff. And
Sure.
so that's part of that's, I guess that's all just part of my obsession.
Understand? Life imitates art, art imitates life, right?
Hmm.
So now, kind of moving on to characterization specifically. Um, so when I was we had already talked about Richard Scarry, Berenstain Bears, and all that, but the one thing that really stood out to me when I was reading the original series was you had Woodbrook, you had this quaint little town, and you had all this dark entity that kind of exists within it. Um, so the main thing that stood out to me was Blue Velvet.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, opening scene in Blue Velvet.
Hmm.
Yeah, the picturesque town. Then it, yeah, that shot where it zoomed into the ground. You
Yeah.
had all like the beetles and insects like scurrying around underneath this, quaint little town. Um, so you had that big contradiction between those two things. Um, how do you maintain that tension in the new series? Um, and kind of what does that show us maybe about human nature? Or are you trying to comment on human nature at all, or society at large, or anything with that specifically?
um I mean, I feel like, I mean, to me it's sort of like the idea of, um as with the beginning of Blue Velvet, you sort of have this very innocent facade, very similar to the facade with Woodbrook, and then, but then to know then that there's like a definite darkness that's within it. And um and I think that in the 90s with Woodbrook and the second arc, there's um a further like losing of that innocence, or you're sort of seeing how that's eroded, right? um
Okay.
it would be interesting to see, like, to revisit the town of, oh man, what is the town of, it's not Beaverton, is it? What is the town in Blue Velvet?
Well, I know it's filmed in Lumberton. I think they
Oh,
kept it Lumberton, right?
is it Lumberton? Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
yes, yeah, yeah, the sound of the falling log. Anyway, so the but yeah, to revisit that after the events in Blue Velvet, you know what I mean? Like to come back to the town, which I mean, they kind of portray it to be like, oh, it's bad. Everything has been like restored, right?
Hmm.
But I
Hmm.
feel like it would be naive to think that it, that everything was, uh, that everything, that there was no darkness anymore, right? Um,
Sure, sure.
to have no evidence of it within the psychologies of like McLaughlin and or Laura Dern. Anyway, the
Sure.
and I think that society, it's to me growing up in a relatively, it's like I grew up in a small city or big town depending on how you want to look at it, called Burlington, Iowa. There's a lot of Burlingtons in the states, but there's one in Iowa.
Hmm.
And it's right on the Mississippi. And it was, to my mind, it seemed like a nice enough little town. The older you got, and especially, and this probably ties into again my fascination with the 90s, because like we lost like three big manufacturing things in Burlington during the 90s. Like we had Champion
Hmm.
spark plugs there that disappeared. We had Murray Turbine that disappeared. There's another one too I'm missing. But anyway, and in doing so, you just sort of saw the town get more depressed.
Sure.
And that I had such an impact on me that I feel like it's that sort of, I don't know. Start seeing the edges of things, and you start seeing that
Okay.
there's like whatever you thought was very much like illusory. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And to me, it's sort of like the illusion of safety or whatever, where you kind of like you're very like you just don't know. You don't know what the danger could be because you just don't know.
Sure.
And
Sure.
then once you kind of become older and more informed or whatever, then you can see that there's danger everywhere, and then you start to just sort of learn history.
Hmm. Yep.
As
Yep.
you do, you kind of understand like these places all came from like all these quaint little towns of like Americana or from like stolen land, et cetera, et cetera. So I mean, it's like,
Hmm.
there's all of that wrapped up in it.
Speaking about the legacy or what you want to do next and the kind of the reception of Beneath the Trees and all that. Um, so multiple Eisner nominations, critical acclaim and all that. Um, how has the reception of the first one kind of played into your creation of the second one? Have you felt any pressure, uh,
Yes.
fan expectations, all of
Yeah.
those things?
Oh my
Uh,
God. Yeah.
has that how has that affected you, and how has that maybe steered you in one direction or another?
So it's all just in my head, but I was very concerned about um finding the right story to tell with the second book, and I was afraid that it would be that I would just find myself relying on these things that worked in the first book.
Okay.
Um, and that's not to say there's definitely echoes of the first book, but I'm like, if you've read through the first volume, then you know, like I like to have echoes of
Hmm.
um, story beats, either within the issue or even between issues, just to I find that sort of stuff formally just kind of interesting,
Hmm.
and I'm employing stuff like that for an effect, versus like a crutch, I would say.
Hmm.
But yeah, I definitely wanted to not like just get stuck playing the hits with the second go around. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Hmm.
Which I it took a bit, and then finally kind of realized like how um this second arc could go, and then I was kind of off and running, and it's not. I mean, it's gonna be different for sure. It's its own book. Um, and it's, I mean, it's it's actually kind of. I'm pretty excited to see what people think because it's gonna be a big swing. But it's it's definitely different enough, and it's very exciting with what we're gonna do with it. But it took me a while to get there in the beginning when I was writing it,
Hmm.
just because of all that stuff and because of the pressure, and I was just really starting to, it didn't take too long to get on track. But like I've at the very beginning was definitely like in my head way too much.
Was there anything like any cliche idea or like movie trope or trope from any type of media that you swore upon that you were going to avoid
Oh
specifically, or
no, no, nothing necessarily that like nothing explicitly. I
okay,
tend to I don't know, it's weird because like it's genre. So like when you look at stuff like issue 2 of the very first arc, um, and the way that all that stuff plays out with Cherry, like in my mind, that's sort of like a giallo horror movie. Like there's
hmm,
definitely like that's like a slasher movie. Um,
sure,
and so I played into that because it felt like
okay,
that's what that needed to be. You know what I mean? Like
hmm,
that's the grammar for that type of a scene.
hmm,
Um, so that felt necessary, but I'm also very happy to subvert expectations whenever I can. And because it's fun, I have a lot of fun just sort of
sure,
playing against what expectations are, just because it's we all understand and we're all pretty savvy. So like, let's have some fun with it.
sure,
But I don't think, I mean, I'm sure there's stuff that like I like immediately would just not want to do. But
hmm.
nothing that I set out like, I would consider everything before saying no.
And also, IDW said that that original series was a shot in the arm. That was expressed in by Jake Williams in
Oh,
that
sure.
Hollywood Reporter article. So, what do you think readers were craving that your series delivered? Really
Man.
specifically, for me, it was refreshing. We had the dichotomy there, with the small town and then
Hmm.
the graphic violence and all that. What do you think specifically people latched onto there? What made it that shot in the arm?
I mean, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it, by the way. But like
Okay.
I think, I mean, I feel like a lot of it felt owed to the anthropomorphic characters. There's something about it that it's sort of universal in a weird way. I mean, there's some people that just hate that stuff, and that's fine. That's great. This book's not for them. That's no problem.
Mhm.
But for those that are into it, like it taps into a certain nostalgia that's like not specific necessarily. Like there's a lot, like the book also is doing pretty well in foreign printing as well. And
No, interesting. Okay.
to me, that sort of speaks to this sort of universality of like all of them have like a anthropomorphic animal story thing that's really big in their culture.
Hmm.
And so I think this is it, and there's a certain innocence ascribed to that. I feel like because this is usually like a story from our youth, and and then to do such a heinous thing to that, I feel like that's that thing that like I mentioned was sort of seemed like really upsetting, but like should do that then like we should do something with it. And I
Hmm.
think that all sort of wrapped up together is like it like it's interesting. I don't think if these were just people, the story would have done as well. Like
Yep.
I don't think it would have. I mean, I'm sure there'd be some people that would find it very compelling, but the I think there it reached that broader thing because it was these cute animal people.
Hmm.
And it's there, and I think there's also something that's like uh it sort of creates a buffer, even just like culturally speaking, because they're just animal people. You know what I mean? Like they're like
Hmm.
anybody can sort of, I don't know, imagine what the larger backstories are, which is like what
Sure.
reading is. You're the reader's bringing a lot of their own stuff to it,
Hmm.
making it their own and making it work. And so I think that's like to me, it's like I don't know. And I mean, I hope like what I'm doing with the art and the storytelling is also good, but like I feel like a lot of that stuff was this like out of my control. I just happened to like, hit a jackpot with that accessibility.
Well, that makes sense too. You can kind of see yourself more in a anthropomorphic animal
Yes,
than you could,
100%. Yes. Yeah.
I think that makes it more relatable for the audience.
I think so.
Sure. And even going on the backstories of the characters, you've kind of left a lot of things ambiguous,
Yep.
and that
Yeah.
that plays on that reader's imagination as well, and kind of
Yeah,
keeps them
and
involved.
it definitely wanted to be like, I wanted it to be ambiguous in many regards because of that. To sort of leave it to, to make it, more accessible. Um, but then I also like, and I do this with a lot of my art and stuff, but I'll put in enough detail for you to be like, oh, that's interesting. Let me start putting together a backstory for what that would be.
Mhm.
Um, and just for the reader, and so it's, I think stuff like that goes a long way.
There's a large group of comic drops community for sure that has been speculating constantly
Yeah, 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 yeah.
about Sam's backstory, the gap between Preludium and the original series,
Yeah.
the gap between the original series and the new one. They're just digging up all this stuff, and digging into it, and exploring it thematically and making all these predictions. It's been pretty awesome. So,
Very cool.
um, and I guess like kind of the last category I want to ask
Mm.
about is putting together those homage covers, variant
Oh,
covers,
sure.
and things like that. So for the first one in the preview article, yeah, it was revealed Natural Born Killers and
Mhm.
American Psycho, of course, with Tony Fleece. Are you involved in that process? Like maybe choosing what the
Yeah.
homage is going to be, and all that?
Yeah, we had like a larger list, and then we narrowed it down to the six we wanted to do with Tony. And they're all like serial killer stories.
Okay.
So that's the connecting thread. Um, but yeah, and then also we narrowed down the ones that we thought would be pretty great. And then of course, I mean, as your audience knows, I'm sure, like Tony like knocks those out of the park.
And in the past, you've also collaborated with Jason Sean Alexander. So I like
Mm-hmm.
him from Spawn. So that was cool to see
Oh
him
heck yeah, yeah, yeah.
do
He was the
those.
first. I think he was the first variant that we had. That was not. I
Oh,
mean,
okay.
obviously, like all the B covers were Riley Rossmo for the first
Yeah.
art. He did the storybook edition, which is also like the main cover for the new like prestige book that's coming out.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Cool.
and yeah, which is really cool. The Jason Sean Alexander was the first artist to do a variant with Final Order Comics and from the beginning. Like nobody, it was
Oh,
the only
okay.
variant.
Awesome.
Nobody else thought to do one, which I mean, like nobody knew me. It was like I was just a no name. Like some people knew about the book, but like not a
Sure.
ton,
Sure.
and not a lot of people thought it was going to be worth doing a variant on.
So to kind of wrap things up, I'm going to transition to the comic drops fans
Oh
questions here.
yes.
A few of those. So these were commented in the post on my YouTube page. So was there any real life inspiration used for Nigel's murders?
Mm. I No. So like I definitely, I'm trying to think of anything that was like drawn upon for total inspiration, like in a practical sense. And there wasn't anything. Like I kind of went like overboard with all of those because
Okay.
it needed to be like they needed to be these big attaching attention grabbers.
Sure,
And
sure.
so my backstory for Nigel was that he was a grad student, and then he was also like his study had to do with like politics, but specifically like necropolitics, which I don't know if you're familiar with, but it's sort of the way that like in medieval days it would be like the act of like putting a head on a pike or something
Okay,
on the
sure.
gates, right? And that would
Mhm,
just let everybody know, or like to like crucify people on the road leading up to your castle to be like, this is how we
mhm,
deal with people we don't like.
sure.
And then has since like evolved, and now it's also the same. I think you could argue like necropolitics is also the same thing that we see in like, as a deterrent for people that are trying to like for immigrants trying to get through the Sonoran Desert or something. Like, I mean, I feel
Mhm,
like it's hasn't gone away, it's just evolved.
sure.
And so that's sort of like the line of study or whatever, but like there's something about the grandiosity and the theatricality of it that I felt Nigel would gravitate towards. And so,
Okay.
and again, like none of this made it into the book, but like in my head, that was like why he does what he
Okay.
does. You know what I mean? That's why he does what he does.
That makes
Um,
sense. Yeah.
And in terms of the actual violence, like he in terms of why he's doing it with Sam, that's like obviously a thing we actually do kind of get into. But
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
but yeah, that was so no actual like real life that I can think of um
Okay.
that I was drawing upon.
Let's see. So we mentioned American Psycho earlier, but are there any other films that you drew inspiration from for Beneath the Trees, just as a whole, that you could think back to and say, "Well, hey, look, this one right here was kind of made me to structure this scene like this, or this
Yeah.
issue like this, or whatever it may be."
Um. Hmm. I mean, I'll go ahead and say that like I'm sure there's a lot of stuff. Only because I'm a huge film buff, and it feels naive to think that there wasn't.
Okay.
But but nothing like super explicitly. Um,
Okay.
like because I feel like there's stuff that's probably just under the consciousness of it, where I was like, oh, like if somebody was to point it out and be like, do you realize this is from this scene to this thing? I'd be like, oh yeah, that is. Like
Okay.
I would not be surprised. Um, but I feel like there wasn't too much stuff that I explicitly was trying to use it as like inspiration. There is with the second book, but I'm gonna wait. And
Oh, of
then
course.
um when we get to the end, like I'd be happy to come back on. We could talk about it.
Oh, of course. Yeah, I'd love that. Uh, let's see. Next, let's see. Sam seems to be a bear because of their territorial nature. But what about the other animals? How did you choose what animal was which character?
Oh, sure. And I mean it was funny because like the bear part with Samantha was also like when I came up with the idea of it just being I drew an anthropomorphic bear randomly one day with an axe on their shoulder, and then it was like,
Mhm.
it would be interesting if there was like a Richard Scarytown with a with a serial killer in it, and
Sure.
then and then and I was like, oh, and it would be called Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees from the Teddy Bear's Picnic song because I'd always had that line stuck in my head, and then I was like, it has to be a bear, it has to be a bear, and then of course like the territorial thing your listener pointed out, also the cute cuddly nature versus the like of like all the like Berenstain bears or even the Charmin bears, and then also the fact that real bears are totally terrifying and like
Sure.
extremely vicious, and so it's all that. But with the others, I just kind of did like a same thing with genre stuff. Like I was leaning into stereotypes or playing against stereotype depending on what the scenario was,
Okay.
and that kind of continues to be the thing. But like it felt like with Charlie the mole, the fact that he can't see that well is like a big thing because he can't like Samantha was fudging those inventory things the whole time, and she obviously like it was very convenient to have him as like the only like full-time staff.
Hmm.
um
Hmm.
and with Nigel, I definitely was playing against type of being this meek little mouse would actually be this horrible killer,
Hmm.
and things like that. So it's definitely I have fun with it, and it's not something that I don't have any hard and fast rules, but it's kind of turns into whatever feels right in the moment. There's
Okay.
also like you know there's just so many animals you have to come up with, and anytime you have like a group and you're like, all right, what are we doing here, guys? Because I don't want to draw like five dogs sitting around. So like
Sure.
you have to look up, like you got to start doing some image searches for forest animals and be like, what do we got to work with here? I was like, we
I
can do
gotcha.
some badgers, and like let's throw in like, and then you start thinking about like regionality, and then you're
Hmm.
like, well, and like I'm sure there's people that like moved from different parts of the world to come live in different places and whatever, and then you start like you really just get into your head about it.
So they also ask, from a creative perspective, what was your favorite scene to write or illustrate?
Um, in that first arc, my favorite segment was I think I mean my favorite issue is 5. Because it's the strange, weird, well, it's a toss up. But 5, I think 5. Close second was issue 3.
Hmm.
But 5 was like it was just so weird. And as I got into it, I was like, I guess I'm gonna write this in the second person. I didn't realize I was gonna do that, but I just started writing it that way, and it felt right. And then it just kind of, it was definitely one of those issues where it had all the beats worked out, but I didn't know exactly like what the, once you dug in and you're going page by page and writing the actual dialogue and stuff, you're like, you're trying to figure out the tone of it. And you're like, oh, okay, yeah, this is an
Mhm.
interesting, weird one. And then to get to the point where you're at a cave and she's like pulling her head off and there's snakes inside her head and stuff. And you're
Mhm.
like, and there's the dark membrane she goes through and like just all this weird, interiority of it, which is, I mean, the whole book is about interiors and interior lives.
Mhm.
But I think that was, I guess, because it was the heart of all that. That's why it was the most fun for me to do creatively.
Okay.
And then she encounters the bear fight and everything, and like there's just something about it that felt fun and strange. And I definitely, it was one of those ones where I thought people were going to check out. They were going to be like, what? Like check out in a bad way. Like they were going to like
Yeah.
leave,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
because they were going to be like, they were like, I'm checking out of here. Like this is too strange. But instead I've heard good things about it. So it's just goes to show, I guess, like I said way earlier, like the weirder you are, sometimes the more that connects with people.
Sure. Yeah. And then I'll agree. I mean, issue number 5, that's one that I've dove into multiple times in my videos. And
Cool.
there's this debate about the colors of the snakes and
Oh,
what they
interesting.
represent.
Oh, wow.
So I've kind of looked at that as well. And that whole seeing her reflection,
Hmm.
that pulled me back to Twin Peaks.
Oh, cool.
The
Yeah.
evil doppelgangers of the characters
Sure.
that are. So that, I mean, that was kind of a cool
The
connection
reflect,
for
yeah,
me too.
reflection in the membrane, reflection in the water, seeing the bear in the water.
And I guess the final fan question here. So there's a prevailing theory in our community that none of these characters are actually animals. Might my audience be on to something here? What do you think?
So somebody mentioned this before as well. And I'm personally like, they're all animal people. There's no larger sort of illusion that they're actually just real people and we're all just living in Sam's head. Um,
Okay.
but um, but somebody mentioned this, and they also mentioned, I think there's like I don't know if it's a manga. There's another book that does this, and I thought that was like a really great idea, but then I heard about it, and I was like, well, I can't do that now, because it just feels like disingenuous because it wasn't my idea.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
Um, but it's a really good idea. So no, it's not gonna happen. I won't do it. I won't do it out of respect. Like it won't. It'll never happen. Um,
Okay.
but man, that's a good idea.
Well, there are a couple people in the community that are going to be highly disappointed over that one.
I'm sorry, guys. I'm so
It's all right
sorry.
though. Yeah.
You guys were
There's
all
been a lot of
smarter than
speculation
me.
with that.
Whoever was that did the other book is smarter than I am.
So that kind of wraps up our discussion. That's all my questions.
Cool.
So certainly want to thank you for coming on the channel and discussing kind of your creative process
Of
and
course.
both series and what kind of lies in the future. Of course, it's going to drop on July the 9th,
Hmm.
and the pre-order date is June the 2nd, correct?
Yeah. Yes. So
All
yeah,
right.
if you get a chance, best way to get yourself a copy is going to be going to your local comic shop and requesting a copy so that they got one set aside for you specifically on July 9 when it comes out. Because otherwise, it can turn into a bit of a crapshoot, and depending on how many copies they get.
There you go, free for all. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, I want to thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it, and I know my comic drops community definitely appreciates it as well.
Oh, well, I really appreciate it too. And thank you to everybody for reading along and supporting this strange, weird book and basically making it so that I get to make more. So thank you.